I'm going to talk about cryptocurrency. So what is cryptocurrency? And a big question that people have is how does it derive its value? So just a quick zoom out. What is currency? A currency is just a medium of exchange. In other words, it's a store of value for future use. For example, in the United States, we use the US dollar. And in our economy, which an economy really is just a big network of governments and businesses and individuals, the value of this dollar is derived from the full faith and credit of the United States government. So with that in mind, cryptocurrency is just a new medium of exchange. It's a new store of value. And so rather than rather than coming from a central bank or something like that, the Fed, it exists all on the blockchain network. And so there's no central bank involved. And it derives its value from the faith and demand of individual users. So as you can see, cryptocurrency, blockchain, it's all sort of fueled by this philosophy of decentralization, which is no central authority, no central governing network, kind of just keep it peer-to-peer and deregulate it as much as possible. And so that's kind of the underlying philosophy that drove the creation of blockchain, that drives the creation of cryptocurrency. And we'll most likely see more of that in the future. It's not actually made of anything. There's no like real tokens or coins. It's just a string of code that exists on the computer of whoever has ownership of it at the time. So it's just a representation of the value. And it can only exist on the blockchain that it was created on. For example, Bitcoins can only exist on the Bitcoin blockchain. They cannot move to the Ethereum blockchain. And Ethereum, or rather Ether, which is the currency of the Ethereum blockchain, can only exist on the Ethereum blockchain, right? It cannot move to another blockchain. And so, the way that the currency is transferred is with that underlying code is transferred. That's how the quote unquote coins get transferred from, one user to another. So there's three main types of cryptocurrencies. There's Bitcoin, there's Altcoin, and Stablecoin. Bitcoin is the first cryptocurrency ever created. Its primary use is for currency, just giving and receiving payments. And sometimes it's also used for wire transfers. So, you can typically, in order to transfer money or move money around, it's kind of slow, and there can be a lot of transfer fees, especially if you want to transfer money internationally. But with Bitcoin and other crypto, it's very cheap and very quick. So that's a big use case for it, is wire transfers. And primarily, Bitcoin is kind of like I don't know if you guys ever remember like the Beanie Baby fad, or it's kind of just people just are really crazy about it right now. So that's why it has just a ton of value. I think one coin is worth like $46,000 or $47,000 right now. And they say it might even go up to 100,000 soon. But that's the main gist of Bitcoin. So moving into altcoin. Altcoin is really just the name for any alternative to Bitcoin. So, and they'll have typically some will have a variety of different uses. Most famous altcoin is going to be Ethereum. It's the second biggest next to Bitcoin. And Ethereum is very interesting. So what they do is they actually allow you to store computer code, which will create these new things called smart contracts and decentralized apps called dApps that are powered by the currency called Ether. So just to touch on what those are, a smart contract is just a contract that's written in computer code, and it exists on a blockchain, and it's validated by mining and is paid for in fractions of an ether known as gas. So you might hear the term thrown around like, oh, you have to pay gas, or there's the gas charge for this. Most of the different functions like smart contracts, dApps, are all paid for in these things called gas, even NFTs, which we'll touch on later. And the main purpose of smart contracts is really just to eliminate the need for a central authority or intermediary. And dApps, or decentralized apps, are just like regular apps, but there are just some key differences on the developer side, mainly that they're open source. So you can kind of play around with the code and you can adjust them, and you can change them, right? You can add more to it if you like, if you know how to code. They're also autonomous. So again, no central authority. And typically they are free to use, but with the exception of paying, gas fees and things like that for different scenarios, different maybe transactions. So the final coin is called Stablecoin, and you guessed it, it's a stable value. So the coin typically is pegged, the value is quote unquote pegged. And I use that term because that's the term that is used to something with real world value in order to stabilize its value. For example, the US dollar coin is pegged to the US dollar. So the value doesn't fluctuate much as other currencies. So it's a useful form of payment in business. Hungu asked, can you elaborate on smart contract is validated by mining? Right. So I mentioned that, all the transactions and all the data in, blockchain has to be validated because there's no central authority to validate the transactions, right? So that's where mining comes in, that proof of work. So, how do you know that a transaction is legit or valid? So that's what the mining is used for. So miners the process of mining is to solve like complex mathematical algorithms. And that will then, when the algorithm is solved, that will actually validate the transaction. And then it gets distributed to everyone in the blockchain. That's like a key component of the blockchain, is this concept of validation. I might have touched on it, but maybe not in detail. I'll definitely talk more about validating, but simply put, validating is a huge component of blockchain because there's no central authority doing the validating like there is in our current economic system. So like a central bank will validate the value of the dollar, and so so I'm going to do a little bit more research into that, and then I'll get even a more detailed answer for tomorrow. But I hope answers the question a little bit. Okay, great. Yeah, thank you so much for your question. It's a great question. So stable coin, again, is better used for like in business transactions because the value is pegged to something in the real world, and the value of the real world thing won't change that much. For example, US dollar coin is pegged to the US dollar, and we know the US dollar doesn't fluctuate in value. So it's good for business. So that's the main overview of what cryptocurrency is. Even though it's a little bit basic, it can be a little bit confusing. Does anybody have any questions up until this point? That's pretty much what I want to talk about with cryptocurrency. Great, thank you. So the major developments in crypto so far, all the major activities that you can do are, of course, investing, which we talked about pretty extensively in crypto tax, buying and selling on an exchange. What we're going to talk about, I think, next is going to be like NFTs, which is, you can think of it as digital artwork. And also it is segueing into something really, really cool called internet ownership, Web3. So we're going to talk about NFTs in more detail. And then another major development use in crypto is something called decentralized finance, or DeFi. And that's essentially the same thing as financial services, but of course, decentralized. So lending and, credit cards, things like that. Also, something called a decentralized autonomous organization, otherwise known as a DAO. So DAOs, defined by ethereum.org, are member-owned communities without centralized leadership. So, even like businesses can be organized around DAOs. I'm going to talk more about that in detail, but just think of it as a decentralized community where there's no like central leader and everyone kind of has equal voting rights in the community. And technology powers that. And then also tokenization. In tokenizing, it feels very much like encryption. That's probably the closest thing to relate to it. And what it does is it just converts sensitive information, like payment information, into tokens. And what that does is that will protect your personal information while also still allowing it to be used. For example, payment information. You can sort of guarantee that your information is secure, but it's also, it's not stored in the business system. It's actually stored in a separate cloud system. So it's a little bit disconnected from whatever businesses are using it. So it definitely will protect your privacy more, but I think the technology still needs to be developed further. But anyway, so these are some of the major developments in crypto so far, and I'll talk more about them this week. Mason said, crypto seems like something new, but it is a new paradigm to our world. I think we should keep that in mind. Yeah, absolutely. It's a paradigm shift for sure. I think most of the activities, like you can see, like it's still like, financial services. There's still organizations. You're still buying and selling. You're still creating art. So it's not like any new activity is being created yet, but it's just the way that it is organized, distributed, and cared for. It is a real paradigm shift. So it's really exciting. I'm really happy to be learning this. And yeah, that's all I have for today. All right, so that's everything for today. Check out the homework assignment. We're going to link it in the description down below. And if you have any questions, please leave a comment. Thank you.